Hello and welcome to AMA Puget Sound's Coffee Talk series that we host on Thursdays. Today we have a special guest, Mel Carson. He is the founder and CEO and principal strategist at Delightful Communications in the Seattle Puget Sound region. Hi, Mel.
Hello, Julie.
How are
Lovely
you?
to be here,
Yeah.
celebrating a nice coffee chat. I'm on
Yes.
Bainbridge Island with my Bay Hay and Feed coffee cup here, and it's
Nice.
delightful to be chatting with you.
Ah, delightful. Ha 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 ha. Like on Pee Wee's Playhouse, the word of the day. Ah. Yeah, I've got my coffee as well, in Renton here. So it's a lovely day. No, it's not raining, at least not where I am. So it's a great day to have a chat. And today we are going to talk about leadership branding. So let's learn about you a little more. And first of all, Mel, how did you start Delightful, and how did you get into this personal branding, leadership branding?
Yeah, well, I've spent 20 years in the digital marketing space. Originally cut my teeth on SEO and paid search. I joined Microsoft in 2005 to help them launch Ad Center, which is now Bing Ads. And I was at Microsoft for 7 years as their digital marketing evangelist. It was my job. They were very forward thinking back then around community management. And then when social media came out and blogging and then Twitter and Facebook and things like that, very forward thinking about putting someone in a role to help be a face of the company or that part of the company in the digital marketing industry. And that's what I did for 7 years, kind of being an employee advocate, brand journalist kind of thing, running around these events with film crews and recording videos and interviewing other people and blogging and speaking and all that kind of stuff. And then I got caught up in a big round of layoffs in 2012. 5,000 people across the company got laid off. It was nothing personal. It wasn't anything that I'd done. So my number was up, and I thought, well, what am I going to do now? Am I going to, go and work at Google, or am I going to go and work at Yahoo or Facebook or something like that? And I just thought, no, this is the opportunity after whatever it was, 12 years of trying to do something for myself. And so Delightful Communications was born. And originally we hung our hat on three things: social media strategy, because back then nobody had a strategy. It was all like, put the intern in the corner to work on Twitter. Digital PR as well. Digital PR meaning not necessarily media relations or analyst relations, but really thinking about how we can tell better stories about companies through digital, not just through getting them a mention in the Wall Street Journal or whatever, but thinking about blogging, thinking about video, thinking about integrated digital strategies. And then the final thing was personal branding. So somebody said to me, you did a really great job, as an advocate and an evangelist for Microsoft. Why don't you reverse engineer your success on that to help other people do that at other companies? And so we started helping people with personal branding, essentially helping them, their wisdom and experience become more discoverable, shareable, and memorable. And we've grown the company now. We do two things: integrated marketing, for the regular brand side of things for B2B and tech companies, but we also have this growing area now around executive communications, where we kind of shifted slightly from the personal branding side of things, because a lot of these leaders and executives we work with, the personal nomenclature makes them feel a little uncomfortable. So we call it leadership branding. So we work with leaders in, large enterprise B2B technology companies, helping them get their message out through social media and their personal platform.
And so I like what you said, that there was a shift from calling it personal branding into leadership branding. And I think I remember at early on in my marketing career trying to help, my boss, like, hey, let's do this personal branding. And yeah, I remember how off-put they felt of, well, I don't want my personal stuff out there. And then trying to explain to them, no, we're really putting your professional stuff out there. So it's professional branding. But we have to have the human side to it. So I'm curious, have you found more success with people just changing that term?
Yeah, I mean, yes, definitely. I mean, it's grown more inroads with the executives themselves feeling more comfortable with it, but also with their comms teams. You know, a lot of these companies have whole armies behind them of different teams and whatnot. And I think there's a couple of elements to it. Is most executives and leaders, if they get to a certain position in this day and age, are more servant leaders. You know, they're all about the team. They're all about celebrating other people. They're all about, you know, rallying, you know, the company together against, you know, around a common cause and leading from the front. But it's not about them. You know, the authenticity, the empathy, that kind of thing. So that was where just shifting the lens from the personal to the leadership changed as well. But we have actually seen, you know, I started doing this 8 years ago and did get a lot of slammed doors because, you know, I don't want to talk about anything personal. You know, it's all about the business and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, we've now built up a good evidence of a body of evidence around, you know, building trust through those personal connections. We say at Delightful, B2B doesn't need to be boring.
Right.
And it's about people, not just pixels. You know, at the end of the day, if you're going to do a multi-million, billion-dollar deal with another, you're actually doing that with another person. And so having some personal element to your personal platform or your leadership platform just helps make you more interesting, helps humanize you, but also humanize the brand that you work for. And you know, generate some trust, ice-breaking, you know, conversation starters, you know, things like that. So when we work with leaders, you know, we say, okay, you know, what's the day job? Who are you trying to reach? What audience? Okay, it might be customers, partners, employees, journalists, analysts. What else can you share that you're comfortable about sharing from a personal perspective, that you might be able to educate and enthuse and inspire other people? And a lot of that tends to be around different causes that they have or different kind of passions that they have within areas beyond the job that just makes them more interesting, but also helps us as we help them shape more interesting stories and help tie the personal with the professional together.
And which is amazing. And I love that you keep throwing in the word humanize, because we both know human interest it sells. It really does. And I like that you've put that twist in it in explaining that to, you know, leadership folks, that this is why we do this. It's not focus on you. What do you say to those folks? Because I'm sure there's still some people that will have some objections or they don't quite get it. And how do you then explain it to them, you know, the benefits for personal branding, not personal branding, but leadership branding? How do you break down those barriers?
Yeah, we have what we call the reluctant leader, and we have a slide that we share that's called the myth and the magic of the myths versus the magic, and it's kind of answers to what traditional PR people would call rude questions around, you know, this isn't personal, it's about my team, it's not about me, but you know, your team want to know about you. If you're a global, you know, corporate vice president of some area of some big tech company, there are people in far reaches of the world that will probably never actually meet you, but they would like to see a little bit under the hood to see what makes you tick. You know, what are you passionate about? You know, how can they find an emotional connection with you? And it's not just about the customers and partners or whatever that you deal with, but also employees or potential employees. So, you know, we never hammer it home as a must-have. We find that a lot of leaders are like, well, you know, Facebook is just for family and friends. So, you know, so we're like, okay, we'll lock that down. But if they're particularly reluctant about anything, you know, from a personal perspective, we might share something that somebody else either at the same company or at a different company is doing, which is a slight twist that shows them that, we're not interested in seeing on LinkedIn what they had for breakfast or, whatever,
Right.
but just a slight nuance. And what tends to happen with the reluctant leaders is, you just edge them towards the kind of cliff, providing them with some wings, and they're like, oh, I'm not sure about this. But as soon as they jump off and they see the reaction and the engagement that people get, they're like, oh my God, I've been missing a trip for years by not, sharing a little bit more about what I'm about, what makes me tick, and it is. I mean, honor and a privilege is used a lot, in professional, but the fact that myself and my team end up in some of these conversations with leaders that run, multi-million, billion-dollar businesses sometimes that have never actually had the chance to sit down and take a breath and think about some of these things is hugely it's hugely powerful. And then seeing that the penny drop with a lot of them, and then see that they've got something to share beyond just, buy my product, buy my service, or whatever is, as I said, really, really powerful. And it's great fun. It's great fun.
Is. It absolutely is. And along the way, I'm sure you've seen a couple mistakes made by some leaders maybe posting something they shouldn't, whether it's too personal or too private business information. What are some mistakes that you've seen, and what do you recommend to prevent that from happening?
If we're working with executives and leaders, we tend to help them filter out any mistakes. So thankfully, there's been nothing, on our watch, shall we say, that's gone out there that shouldn't have done. But we do a digital, I've seen other people, we have a kind of workshop that we put people through where we show some examples where people, and it's pretty extreme, what people have done without thinking, shared things, or, there was one example of, there was an author that had a book deal that decided to shame somebody on the New York subway for eating, and they were a New York subway employee, and they decided to shame them for eating on the subway and whatever, and it completely backfired on them. So, we try and encourage, people to be more positive and kind of raise their energy, and, probably delete 90% of what they ever start thinking about sharing, because they need to think about, okay, who's my audience? What am I trying to say here? What potentially could be the reaction to what I'm saying? And, if it's a negative reaction, will I be able to back it up and wriggle out of it? And,
right.
But what we definitely do is a digital footprint analysis. And, we have found with people that they don't understand, or have not been equipped with the tools to understand some of the privacy bells and whistles, especially on things like Facebook, where 12 years ago you liked a post that somebody can actually scroll through on your public feed and see that you've liked something that might raise a few eyebrows, and so that digital footprint analysis raises, says, this is showing up for your name. We could try a little bit of SEO, kind of voodoo around this to get rid of it, or maybe you could reach out to that company that you worked with 3 companies ago and ask them to take that bio down because it's confusing, because it's ranking so highly for your name. But then also to go into the social media settings and switch the stuff that you don't want public back to private, because there's it's complicated, but that's where our expertise and services come into play.
Just out of curiosity, how far back do you go, or just when you're doing an analysis on somebody, how far back in time do you go to check their social media history? Do you go all the way back, or?
No. It's typically, I mean, we don't take on clients that are risky. We've had plenty of people come through the website who have had incredible, let's say, criminal histories that have applied to work with us as far as an online reputation management. So it's kind of, whack-a-mole. We don't deal with online reputation in that sense. We're not going to, we're not about online reputation suppressing stuff. It's just occasionally there might be a slight nuance of something that came up. There was an executive who had a YouTube video showing up for his name that was 10 years old, and it was an interview that they'd just got it. He just stepped off a all-night flight. He wasn't looking his best, and he said, "Is there anything you can do about this? Because it's not relevant anymore." It was showing up on Google's, universal search on YouTube, and so we approached the people that own the channel and said, "Look, this isn't relevant anymore. Can you take it off?" But nothing nefarious that would keep us up at night.
Sure. I mean, and that's great. You kind of mentioned this almost, that you are not selective, but you are in a position now where you can turn away a client that's maybe too risky. Yeah. And not everybody is able to do that, especially if they work in-house. I've worked for a couple people where I've had to help them clean up their branding, and it's just like, I can't clean that up. I can't clean that up. I can spritz it with some Febreze, and that's not going to help. Yeah.
And there are people out there, and I know a few that, and that's what they do for a living. It's just something that we've chosen. We would rather take, slightly rough, ready-made diamonds and buff them up and help get their wisdom and experience out of the world. One thing that we also do is we don't take on, we get a lot of people that come in and say, because we rank number one for personal branding consultant because we've been doing it so long, we get people coming through the website saying, "Oh, I don't need to know all about that. I just need 50,000 new Instagram followers a week or something like that." And we're like, I don't need that. I had one lady who said, Can you manage my Instagram account? Do you have a minion that can manage my Instagram account? Oh. And I was like, we don't employ minions here. And so that was an automatic red flag. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really insulting. And yikes. So aside from that woman, that person, like who do you feel is really doing this well as a leader, who's really embraced this branding and personal branding, who's really doing a good job?
I think there are people out there that that just demonstrate a lot of the authentic pieces, that have done a lot of thought about who they are, what they want to say, and how they want to come across. I can't go into details specifically about any or many of our clients, but I do think the work. I think a really good example of the positive effect of somebody showing up and being hugely authentic, and working with a team that is very, very careful, and brilliant about working with him to bring out the best elements that then has a positive effect on the brand is someone like Satya Nadella. I mean, we do a lot of work for Microsoft anyway through Delightful, but just seeing how he has taken on that role, written the book, hit refresh about how that whole thing, as he became CEO and how he's turned. I think when I left in 2012, the share price was $15 or $25, and now it's up in the many hundreds and things like that. But also just from a cultural perspective, that he's always led from the front, from an authentic, let's build and empower other people, let's celebrate other people, let's put customers and partners at the heart and make them the heroes of our stories. But he's done it in such a way that has just been, very gentle, very authentic, but bold at the same time.
Right.
And I love the way that he's done it, and the fact that he showed up, right from the start. A great friend of mine is called Steve Clayton, who I think you should get on the show. And he's Microsoft's chief storyteller, and he also has done a lot of great work around telling stories within the company and really changing the face of the company externally through celebrating some of the amazing people that they have in the business. So Satya and some of the work that Steve's done, and then I don't know, it could be anyone and anyone that is willing to put themselves out there. We have a mantra or an acronym that if you want to increase the halo effect of your wisdom and experience, you have to increase your aura. So that's you need to be authentic. You need stuff that you share or stuff that you talk about to be useful. That it needs to be relevant to your target audience. You've got to figure out who your audience is, for starters.
Yeah.
Who are you trying to reach? So authentic, useful, relevant, but also actionable.
Yes.
Helping people take action. So when they read a blog post or an article, or they watch a video, there's some action that somebody's got to take at the end of it. And I think a lot of people in our digital marketing industry do that very well, and in our specific industry do that very well, and are willing to give away a lot of stuff, for free, wisdom and experience for free, simply because they get it back in spades through knowing that the advice that they're giving out and whatnot is helping other people, but also it has a positive effect on the companies or the agencies or the brands that they work for. So
absolutely. So when somebody is starting out, because I've run into some folks that you tell them all of these wonderful reasons why you should engage in leadership branding and branding yourself and putting yourself out there. They're all on board for like 2 weeks, and they're connecting with people, they're posting all great stuff, and then they drop off because one reason or another, and they end up going in these spurts. And it almost I don't want to say fair weather, but it's like a spurt. And how do you work with those folks that they've got great things to share, but they're just not doing it consistently?
Yep. I mean, we have a process we call the Leadership Brand Lab, and it's an interview where we sit people down and we say, okay, well, who are you trying to reach? Who's your audience? What is it that you do? One of the questions is, can you articulate in one sentence what it is that you do? And you'd be amazed how many people can't. And what is the value that you bring? So, we put together the art and the science. The art is the branding. So it's, what do you do? Who do you do it for? And what is the value that you bring? The branding side of things is really around, we go deep on what we call what is your professional purpose beyond, paying off the car or the mortgage or putting the kids through school or whatever it is. What gets you out of bed in the morning? What excites you? What thrills you? What motivates you? And then there's a question around the legacy. As you look back over your career, what impact are you going to want to have had?
Yeah.
There's that, and then the digital footprint side of things, and then we say, okay, let's start with a cadence. Let's focus on 3 focus areas, and it might be, customers and partners, and then it might be digital transformation, and then it might be diversity and inclusion in the some double click into that, because everybody's talking about diversity and inclusion. And then that gives people focus areas, in order to curate or create content or share things on, around those specific messaging buckets. And then we just suggest, don't go out all guns blazing. Don't suddenly start, your Twitter and your Facebook and your LinkedIn and your TikTok and your Snapchat and your, Clubhouse and all that kind of stuff. Just start small. Have a plan. Plan ahead over the course of the month. What's coming up that that you could be part of the conversation. Follow relevant people in your industry or relevant companies, and make sure that you've configured alerts so you can dive in and comment. Because it's not just about what you broadcast and tell the world, it's how you engage and lift up and share other people's content and what they've got to say. Yeah. But start small and build, and we call it a discipline. It really is a discipline that you learn over time. It becomes part of your DNA to remember, gosh, I haven't been on LinkedIn for a while, or I haven't shared something on my Instagram that could go to Facebook. For me personally, Instagram and Facebook as well as LinkedIn are hugely beneficial because, I've got 20 years in digital marketing. A lot of the people that I worked with 20 years ago are now VPs and CMOs of marketing in other big companies, and I'm connected to them on those platforms. So just being disciplined about putting stuff out there, but not trying to be all things to, all angels and men straight out of the gate, because people do run out of steam.
They do. So in essence, it almost sounds like you have to write a marketing campaign for yourself. And I always find that funny because I've run into many marketers, and I've said this before, that marketers, we can market anything but ourselves. So it's very fascinating that you almost have to treat yourself as the product you're marketing. And it's so strange to think that way. Yeah.
It's strange, but you got to get over that. I have a little bit of patience when you bring on, especially when people have, are paying for the pleasure of us working with them, and they're like, oh, I'm not really sure. And I'm like, A, you're paying for this, and B, you got to get over it. Because the key to it is that, and when I talk at conferences, I kind of say, who thinks they're a brilliant marketer? And all these hands go up. Who thinks they do a great job for their companies? And all these hands go up. And then who's really good at marketing themselves? And no hands go up, or except there's always one dude, standing there with
really a sales guy,
flat shoes on and sunglasses and everything. I'm like, no. But thinking about your personal brand and the way that we talk about it is really a moment in time where you can look back over your career and just be, just spend a little bit of time reflecting on everything that you've achieved, everything that you've done throughout your career, and the story, the ladder of how you got to where you are. But then thinking about that legacy question, okay, where do I want to go? What's the impact that I want to have? You realize I've got to put a plan in together. And what happens is when people do, they accelerate quicker towards their goals, which means that they can surpass those goals. Yeah. I had just a brief story. There was a healthcare CEO who I was telling all this to. He was, 55, and we're in Bellevue having coffee, and I was telling him all this. And I said, what do you think? And he was looking at me like this. I said, what do you think? And he said, I want to punch you right now. And I was like, oh, why is that? And he said, well, if I'd thought about some of this stuff 20, 30 years ago, my career would have been completely different. Because I think certainly I'm hitting 50 this year. I know I don't look like it. I use oil of Olay. Not really. But I'm hitting 50 this year, and I'm thinking, I've only got 10 or 15 years left. And what am I going to do? Am I going to be sitting on a beach in the Bahamas looking back over my career, with any regrets? Am I taking all those opportunities? It's powerful stuff.
It is. So quick question with that. Are you seeing, because leadership roles are starting, I would imagine there's some 30-year-olds in that. Are you seeing a difference in maybe age groups that are adopting the leadership branding?
I've done talks to, 40, 15 to 19-year-old girls through Girls Who Code. I've done talks for them and got really great responses. One time they were all on their phone. I thought they weren't listening to me, but I was getting messages saying, it was so informative. I was deleting old photo bucket accounts from 5th grade because I was so embarrassed about, what was showing up on, on my social media. So I think the earlier you start and the earlier that you're conscious that you have audiences, whether you own it or not. So, we get a lot of graduates or whatever applying for jobs at our company, and I go blah 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 Instagram, and I'm like, nope, I don't want them working at my company because they don't fit our culture, or they've said something silly and or whatever. So I don't think it matters what age. I think that the younger that you are, the better it is that you start thinking about this in terms of it. And yes, it's not organic, and no, it's putting a marketing plan sounds like it's very staged or whatever, but it works. And if you're mid-career and you start thinking about this, it can help you accelerate, towards your goals. And if you're late career, it can help you tick off a number of boxes. If you're like 5-10 years left to go before you retire, that you make sure that you can look back and be supremely happy, confident, and proud of what you've achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I don't know if it was actually mentioned as one of the benefits, but networking is a huge deal, especially if you're early and mid-career. When you're later in your career, you still have that opportunity for knowledge sharing, and even getting to retirement, you might get that job that you never thought you would. But having that networking aspect within LinkedIn especially is so important. So, So one last question for you.
Okay.
Before we tick off. So, and you've kind of talked about it all over, but let's say we have somebody watching, they haven't done anything with leadership branding. They are leadership level. What do you say to them? What's the first step that you would recommend for them to just get started? Not to just make a big splash, but at least just to get started.
Yeah, it's to really think about, as I said, how can you articulate what you do, who you do it for, and the value that you bring. Because there are too many results-oriented marketers that I see on LinkedIn. It's like that, that doesn't make you stand out from everybody else, and it is actually a given. So double click into a bit more detail about what you do. What is your role? Who do you do it for? And what is the value? What's it like working with you? What differentiates you, from other people? And why would somebody want to work with you or buy from you or be employed by you? And to think about those different audiences, be aware of the fact that your leadership personal brand is out there, whether you own it or not. And so, if you're we've got 25, 26 employees at Delightful. I'm now more and more aware of what I put on social media now, because when we're hiring, I know those folks are Googling me to find out, what I'm talking about, and would I be a good boss, and, all that kind of thing. So being aware about all that, and then, thinking about putting together a plan of how you can reach those different audiences. But then I do think the kind of the question around your professional purpose and why you do what you do, and what really makes you get out of bed in the morning, but beyond just the job role is important. And then your introduction, it all wraps up. I mean, we help people with an impactful introduction. I always talk about my sister-in-law, Aubrey, who's a lawyer. What do you do? I'm a lawyer. End of conversation. What do you do? I'm a CEO of a marketing agency, people then say, oh, which one? And they work in, I don't know, something completely different. And I say Delightful Communications, and they say, oh, I haven't heard of that one. And it's kind of a bit uncomfortable. When somebody says, Mel, what do you do? And I say, I help brands and leaders become discoverable, shareable, and memorable. And they're like, ooh, what's all that about? And then I dive in, because if I just say I'm a CEO of a B2B technology marketing agency, it's kind of a bit boring in the end of the conversation. So just thinking a bit more creatively and spending time reflecting and celebrating your career successes, and thinking about where you want to go and being very purposeful about it.
Absolutely.
If people, I didn't tell you about this when we were talking about it, and maybe you can send it out or put it in the thing, but on Amazon we wrote a book called The Introduction to Personal Branding, and it's on Amazon. It's about $5 or something like that, and it's a very, very small read, takes less than an hour, and it's got all these principles and a lot of kind of storytelling about how we came up with it.
I believe we have it linked below already. So
okay, good.
Yeah, perfect. Those are great final thoughts. Let's take those as wonderful final thoughts. And we kind of went over, and I apologize.
That's all right.
This was so fantastic, Mel. I really, really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge specific to leadership branding and why you should put yourself out there. And it's so important. And you're preaching to the choir for me. So I really do thank you for your time and your knowledge.
Good stuff, Julie. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Take care.
You too. Bye. Oh, and I do have to, I'm sorry, I'm not doing my job as a YouTuber. Nope. If I don't say, thank you so much, everyone, for watching. All of Mel's links are in the description, including his company, Delightful Communications. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please tap the like button, subscribe, and tap the notification bell to be sure you're getting our newest content. We're taking a break next week. So we'll be back the following week with more guests. So thank you all. Bye.
Take care. Thank you, Julie. Bye.